move forward playing a team, didn't make my question maybe succinct enough, but.
Well, the one thing you cross your fingers that Cynthia Cooper isn't playing. Okay, that's one thing, because I have so much respect for her because she cost us a couple of national championships at La Tech. Cynthia Cooper had ever bit as much to do that with that as Cheryl Miller did back in the day. And Texas Southern men went down and played Florida the other day. I don't think they'd won a game. They beat Florida at Florida. Soon as you think you're invincible, somebody will reach up and kick you in the butt. And when you have a coach that has a background like Cynthia, why wouldn't you want to play hard for her? Because she understands what pros, Olympians, and coaching at USC and national championships. I'd be scared to death to come into practice and not give it my best, knowing that I'm looking at a Larry Bird, a Magic, or a Dr. J coaching me. I think that's the hardest thing, and she can get that program going to the highest level. All it takes is recruits or coaching people up, because this is why unfortunately too many teams have to take guarantee games to keep their program afloat. And I think she's played 4 of them already, and we'll be the 5th and probably more to come. But when you get a chance to play David instead of Goliath, sometimes I'd like to be in that locker room. I'd like to give that speech about being the severe underdog or something like that, and to get the kids to play above themselves. And this game will be, I think, very similar to after we beat DePaul. We spent so much time for DePaul, we weren't ready for really Stephen F. for 40 minutes. I think the same thing with the Texas. We spent so much time getting ready for Texas. Will we be ready for the next 2 ball games against Texas Southern and TCU? I'm still experimenting with lineups, rotations, and I'm going to keep doing that all the way through the first couple of games in conference. Because in today's world, you better. Because you never know when that phone's going to call from the trainer, somebody's going to be out, the portal's going to call, COVID's going to call. Great play from a kid that wasn't starting over a thing. All those things, you better be able to coach through all the things that are going to go right or wrong, just like Jimbo had at quarterback. It's a completely different way. I've had 14 players healthy and ready to play all year long. And Vic had 3 out. He had 1 going to the portal the day after we played. And he's number 11 in the country. That's today's world. Hey, if that television camera's not working for you, move over to that next one over there, or move over to the next one. Or move from here down to Caldwell and take over that newspaper. It's going on in business, it's going on in sport, it's going on in everything. And as adults and young people, we are all having to adjust to today's world. And you better be able to, what's Ross's word, pivot. You better be able to pivot and be ready for anything. And I think that's what this team has done a pretty good job of that. Now, I'm looking at Texas film for the next 2 weeks. Texas film to correct our mistakes against somebody that did it better than us. So I've got to use that tape to get ready for the SEC, because we'll play a lot of teams similar. So it has nothing to do with Texas Southern and TCU. I've got to correct us. And the only way I can correct us is be able to show what it's going to take at that next level. Because, yes, I believe we have a good team, but there's a lot of difference between good, very good, and playing in April. There's so much difference, and right now we've got a long way to go in that aspect, but so does everybody but about 5 to 10 teams in the country have a long way to go. So how was that short-winded answer?
It's in there, I got it, that's good, thanks.
Gary, you mentioned the David and Goliath aspect of it. What's the key to winning games as Goliath?
Be humble or you'll stumble. And that's something that you better realize. If you're still locked in on your last loss or your last excuse, and that's in today's world, it's an excuse, then you're not going to be able to do what's in front of you today. And adversity happens to everybody, to all of us, everything. It wasn't an adversity that we lost the game. Texas stayed with their game plan a lot better than we stayed with ours. Our game plan was not to go in there and our first 4 shots shoot 3 threes. 3 of them went in. And all of a sudden, you think you're invincible. And then all of a sudden, here it comes back. You start feeling too much of yourself instead of starting going with the game plan that it was going to take to win the game for 40 minutes. You go with the moment. And who was going to expect Texas to miss 9 out of their first 10 shots? And so instead of us running our plays, we were running transition basketball, and we're not executing very well in transition or shooting the shot that they wanted us to. My offense, if you were a football coach, you start with a running game, you go the passing game. And my offense is built around set plays and execution and a balance between inside and outside. And we didn't get that balance to the second half. And by then, Texas had already felt very good about themselves. We had trouble guarding speed, particularly with Taylor and Harmon. We had trouble guarding speed and either closing the gaps or chasing the player across. Speed, if it's executed right, can hurt you in every sport. Baseball, leadoff hitter. Football, Nana Smith. Basketball, they had Harmon, and I have to get Q to be able to guard that type of speed, but at the same time, she's got to give me the offense along with the defense that I want. So I got a lot of parts that I'm trying to work on. I would rather be Goliath, but every now and then I've got that speech for being David, because I've been there a lot of times in the SEC chasing a Tennessee when they won 3 straight national championships. I've played that role before, and I can play that card, but I'd rather be the big dog and the favorite. I'd rather have 7,100 fans in the building. I'd rather have 1,400 students that probably 1,300 of them saw us for the first time this year. Maybe we can win them back, but you got to win them back. They're not just going to come back, and that's what we've got to do before they go home for a month. Faculty and students, they're gone 5 weeks. That's the hardest thing about basketball and finals, to have a consistent fan base during the football season.
Gary, how important is this week? You have 2 games, and then you have a week off before the next one, so to kind of have those good feelings and feel like you're back on track.
What we're going to miss is the men's practice team. I'll have them today. I only had 3 yesterday, but when you lose your men's practice team, that's putting a lot of minutes. I might not have them back, all of them back until January the 18th, and that hurts. I got a few that are local that will come back. That's what I'm gonna miss. So what we've got to do this week is we got to compete against each other, and I've got to be able to not just be evaluating the maroon team that's running my offense, but evaluating the white team who's trying to stop my offense, and they know what we're running. I want to see improvements both on both levels. I want to see competition for jobs. That's why I think I've had 7 out of 9 different starting lineups. I want to see competition for jobs, and let's just bring it on.
Good.
I got one more, if it's all right. You mentioned you were going to keep looking and evaluating up until SEC play. Is that unusual? I've never heard you mention that before. Do you typically do that?
Not as much, because last year I had the same starting lineup every game all year. The year before, we were pretty well set with Carter and their players. We were pretty well set, but the level of competition is good, particularly at the post play. I'm trying to find, can Sidney Roby play like Sidney Roby did in the second half? Or was that just a flash? Okay. Can we drive the ball against the high ball screens and make the layup and pocket pass out to the wings where we can utilize our three-pointers? After we hit one of those, Texas didn't come off the shooters. They said, all right, point guard, you make the layup, we can live with that because we're not going to foul you, which they didn't do. So Jordan Nixon goes the whole game without getting to the foul line. That's part of what you want to do against us. They'd foul our post players, but you don't want to put Jordan or Pitts at the foul line. So their game plan was, if one person can probably beat you with 37 points or something like that, shut down the rest of them. We've played that game before as well.
You've had 9 games now to evaluate Patty. What did you think of her early on?
In space, she rebounds very well. In practice, she knocks down those shots. She's knocked down those shots before at Ohio State. I've just got to get her consistent to knock down and score easier at times without just relying on the three. If you can rebound in a crowd, you can score in a crowd. And that's just something I've got to get her convinced. There's so much more to her than what she has given us offensively this year. But when you look at her, you just say, God, this kid's going to go off every game, every practice. And maybe it'll happen that way. Hopefully it will.